All right, let's get straight into it. Today, we're taking a deep dive into J.B. Priestley's classic play, An Inspector Calls, breaking down everything you need to know to absolutely smash your GCSE exams. So picture this. It's 1912. We're in the fancy dining room of the Burlings, a super wealthy family. They're all celebrating because their daughter, Sheila, just got engaged to a guy named Gerald Croft, who's from an even posher family. Everything seems perfect, right? But what they don't know is their cozy little world is about to be completely blown apart. So the evening kicks off with the head of the family, Arthur Burling, giving these big, confident speeches. He's a rich factory owner, and he's totally convinced he knows everything about everything. Now, this is where Priestley gets really clever with something called dramatic irony. The play's set in 1912, but the audience watching it knows what happens next. So when Mr. Burling calls the Titanic unsinkable, we know it's literally about to sink. Right away, this tells us not to trust this guy's judgment. And he does it again. He dismisses any talk of war, but of course, the audience knows that World War I is just 2 years away. Priestley's making a point here. The powerful, arrogant men running the country are completely clueless, and that's a dangerous thing. And this quote is his entire philosophy in a nutshell. It's all about looking out for number one, the exact opposite of the message the play is trying to teach us. And just as he says this, bam! A sharp ring of the doorbell cuts him off. The timing is just perfect. That doorbell signals the arrival of our inspector, Inspector Gould, and he's got some shocking news. He tells the family that a young woman, Eva Smith, has just died. She committed suicide by drinking disinfectant. The inspector has this theory. He believes her death wasn't just a random tragedy, but the end result of a chain of events. And he suspects that every single person in that room is a link in that chain. He starts his investigation with the man of the house, Mr. Burling. So the inspector rewinds the clock about 2 years. He shows Mr. Burling a photo of Eva Smith and asks him if he remembers her from his factory. Mr. Burling barely skips a beat. He admits, yeah, he fired her. Why? Because she was one of the leaders of a strike asking for a tiny pay raise. And he's not sorry at all. He says he had to keep labor costs down. Notice that? No remorse. He flat out refuses to accept any responsibility, which really sets the tone for the older generation in this play. Okay, next up, the inspector turns to Sheila. He reveals that Eva later got a job at a posh shop called Millward's. He shows Sheila the photo, and you can just see the horror on her face. She recognizes her instantly, and her question, it's the first time anyone in the family even considers that they might be guilty. Sheila confesses. In a fit of bad temper and jealousy, she used her family's status as big customers to get Eva fired from that job too. But here's the difference. Unlike her dad, Sheila is immediately consumed by guilt. She's horrified by what she did. And this is the first major crack we see in this perfect family. Now, the investigation really starts to heat up. The inspector reveals that after being fired again, a desperate Eva Smith changed her name to Daisy Renton. The second he says that name, Gerald Croft has a huge reaction. And Sheila notices. And here's where the hypocrisy of the upper class really comes out. Gerald admits he had an affair with Daisy, he rescued her, set her up in an apartment, and for a few months he was her fairy prince. But, and this is a big but, he was engaged to Sheila the whole time. It just shines a light on the massive double standards of the era. The inspector now turns his attention to the matriarch, Mrs. Burling. Now, she's a leading member of a charity committee that's supposed to help desperate women. So the inspector asks her about a young, pregnant woman who came to her for help just a couple of weeks ago. Mrs. Burling is just cold as ice. She admits she turned the girl away. Why? Because she didn't like her manners and was offended that the girl used the name Burling. She feels absolutely zero guilt. In her mind, she was just doing her duty, totally blinded by her own class prejudice. And then we get this absolutely killer moment of dramatic irony. Full of self-righteousness, Mrs. Burling says the father of the unborn child is the one to blame, and that he should be held responsible. What she doesn't know, of course, is that she is talking about her own son, Eric, who walks back into the room at that exact moment. It's just brutal. So, Eric's back in the room, and this is it. This is the climax. All the final, ugly pieces of the puzzle are about to fall into place. Eric completely falls apart. He confesses everything. He was drunk, he forced himself on Eva, and he got her pregnant. He tried to help her by stealing money from his dad's company, but, and this is so important, she refused to take the stolen money. That's why she went to Mrs. Burling's charity as a last resort. So it all comes crashing together. Mrs. Burling, in her pride, refused to help her own son's child. With all the secrets out, the inspector's tone changes. He's not just an investigator anymore. He delivers this incredible, powerful final speech. This is basically Priestley himself talking to the audience. He's saying that Eva Smith isn't just one person. She represents all the working-class people who are being crushed by the system. This line right here, this is the heart of the whole play. It's the absolute core of Priestley's message, and it's a direct attack on Mr. Burling's every man for himself speech from the beginning. It's all about community and social responsibility. And he leaves them with this terrifying warning. For the audience in 1945, who had lived through 2 world wars, these words, fire and blood and anguish, would have hit really hard. It's a prophecy about what happens when a society is built on greed and selfishness. And with that, he just walks out, leaving them all completely stunned. So the inspector's gone, and the family is an absolute mess. But just when they're trying to figure out what just happened, a new piece of information comes to light that changes everything all over again. And this is where that generation gap becomes crystal clear. Mr. and Mrs. Burling, all they care about is avoiding a public scandal. They're desperate to just forget the whole thing happened. But Sheila and Eric, they're genuinely changed. They've accepted what they did was wrong, and they've actually learned the inspector's lesson. Then Gerald comes back with a bombshell. He's called the police station, and there's no Inspector Gould on the force. A quick call to the hospital confirms it. No girl has died from suicide tonight. Mr. and Mrs. Burling are thrilled. They think it was all just some elaborate hoax. But just as they're laughing and celebrating, the phone rings. It's the police. A young woman has just died, and an inspector is on his way to ask some questions. The curtain falls, and we're left wondering, who was Inspector Gould? And maybe more importantly, will the Burlings get it right this time?